Do you have meetings with your team? The answer is probably yes. You probably
Maybe.
talk to your team at some point in your practice. There's different kinds of meetings that you're supposed to have, and there's better ways to run them, and there's worse ways to run them. Here's the reality. Your retention of current team members rests primarily on their job satisfaction and their ability to exist in the state of their role for an achievement level, on a pay level, and on a bunch of other categories. And often, lack of structure, lack of leadership, and lack of growth opportunity in the micro to just improve on their role, and even in the macro to move up in your organization, is what produces bad employee results and produces employees leaving your organizations. We see this all the time with your clinicians, and we see this all the time in any other non-clinical category. The reality is you have a people-based business. Your business is people. Your business is run by people. So if you don't know how to manage your people and run meetings effectively and don't know how to meet with your employees effectively, your business will suffer. So that's what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah. In a thin profit margin business like private practice in the mental health space, a lot of your profits end up coming from employee performance in sectors that are not the service element. And so if your administrative team is not performing at the level that they should be performing, it can mean you're, quite frankly, wasting money on marketing. It can mean you're losing intakes, which is just bogging up a system. We've seen practices really struggle, uh, and it can come entirely from the small sliver that is the administration element. I think also, like Josh mentioned, the retention piece is so important when you're dealing with clinicians, especially because the initial onboarding for a clinician is most likely the most costly part, right? You've got to recruit them. Oftentimes you have to get them credentialed. So there's a lot of costs involved there. You're increasing your spends on your platforms like Simple Practice. Sometimes that means you're also increasing your advertisement dollars. And it takes time for you to really get an ROI and then also get into sort of the swing of things with them to really start seeing that profit. Some practices won't profit from their clinician in the first year, which means you need to bank on having this clinician for a year, 2 years, 5 years, right? And so really effective ownership, accountability, and proactively addressing bottlenecks in your business literally is profits for
Yeah.
your business. And if you don't have profits, you're not running a safe organization, and you're not running an organization that maybe will meet your goals ever in any
Yeah.
timeline. So,
We're going to unpack four categories to impact client results. Employee results and employee retention and employee training. We're going to talk about the onboarding process of a new hire. We're going to talk about the management and training process of a new hire into an everyday cadence. We're going to talk about then ongoing management. And then we're going to talk about macro issues like yearly retention, annual retention promotions, and some of those pieces, or exit and some of those frameworks. And we're just going to work down the list of essentially your journey from the leadership eyes when you're employing someone. And we're going to really spend a lot of time on that middle section of weekly management and what that needs to look like. I want to talk about onboarding first. Really, before even onboarding starts is the interviewing and hiring process. I think there's a lot of truth in, who you hire is who you get. And so the more you interview, the better you interview, the better results that you're going to get once they're inside of your organization. Attilio, we really like to follow a specific framework for any role in an interview process to try and correctly pull someone in. Walk us through kind of that three-step interview process that makes sense for almost any role.
yeah. So before you're interviewing, I think the most important elements are going to be actually have the job description set and have a job scorecard set. Because when you show up to your first interview, you need to be able to look at this job scorecard and say, is this person going to meet my criteria or not? And I think you can bluntly ask your candidates if they really think they can hit the performance indicators that you want them to hit on the timelines that you want them to hit. And so a lot of people, especially if you want hires that come with batteries included, if you want that, which I think most new business owners should strive for that, instead of trying to train someone from scratch. If you want someone that has batteries included, they should be able to tell you directly and possibly even advise you on the performance indicators that you're asking for them. So I think step one is the preparation for this onboarding process, the interviewing and all that stuff. And so that means, like I said, set up a job description that you're happy with, and set up a job scorecard with a clear like mission statement for the job, like a position, with a clear like 3 to 6 performance indicators for
Yeah.
the position. So like in the first month, you need to do this. You need to be trained on XYZ thing. In, you know, on an ongoing basis, you need to keep intakes within this closing rate. And that's what you're basing the position on, and that's what you're basing their management on in perpetuity. Okay. So it's really, really important to get the scorecard done. Now, after that is like your actual interview process. In that segment, that's where you'll do a culture interview first. So is this person going to be a good fit for the organization? Like, would you actually like working with this person? Because if you don't like him, it's going to be hard to work with them forever.
I
And
want to
then,
just jump in there and emphasize that point. Like your ability to successfully like and work with this person will never change, right? You can always teach a dog new tricks, but if you hate the dog, how they look, you're not gonna like love it the way that you're supposed to. So I just like want to double click on that to say that make sure you like spending time with the person and you enjoyed that conversation. That's not always required for every role, but most roles, certainly.
is it a culture fit? And then from there, you should have several candidates move on to your next interview stage. By several, I mean like 3 to 5 people who are moving on, if not more. The next interview stage is going to be mostly skills interview. Okay, so this is just, can they back up their claims? You want to ask them difficult questions here, like put them in scenarios, or give them like little trick tests just to kind of gauge sort of like where they're at in values and other things. And so the skills interview, actually, most practices typically have like a few therapists who even show up. So it's kind of like a little bit of a board. If you guys are maybe really serious about getting people in for the skills interview, that's how we've seen it. Otherwise, after the skills interview, then you go ahead and set everything up for your offer letter and make a decision on who it is that you're actually going to bring in. Depending on how many people you're going to hire, you may send out one or more of these offer letters and then just go into that negotiation period. So that's maybe like the step one is like the preparation, the interviews, and getting everything all set to bring this person in so that they can crush it. Step two, did you have anything you wanted to add real quick?
That I think when we think about crafting interview questions, one of the things that I like to prepare is based off of what I either want to prevent in my organization or based off of what is currently a good fit in my organization. I'll zoom in on like note submission, for instance. A lot of practices really struggle to get their clinicians to finish their notes. If you ask a clinician, hey, do you think that you're good at finishing notes and submitting them on time on a session? Is that something you're able to do? That is a binary question that's mostly yes or no, or versions of that yes or no question. And you're going to always get limited information, and you're going to essentially get like, oh yeah, I'm totally capable to fill in the blank. And that doesn't actually feed you any sort of proof on whether this person can actually back up that promise or not. So for some of those questions, like, man, how does this person actually interact with their notes? You have to ask it adjacently. Hey, Sally, tell me what note submission was like, what that cadence was, and what are kind of those rhythms that you had at the last practice, just so we know what you're kind of coming in with. And it feels like a much softer question. It requires them to dialogue, and you can ask follow-up questions about it, and you'll get a much better sense of what they actually do and how they actually, notes were, super easy. I always submitted them on time, but not everyone in the org did that, and I always hated that. Okay, cool. Check. This person's a little bit, type A about their notes. Other person, oh, you know what? Notes aren't really that big of a deal. We just kind of got them done when we got them done, and we just always make sure that they're whatever. Like, cool. Like yellow flag. Let's see how the rest of this interview goes.
Yeah, I love that. And a tactic that I've been experimenting with lately on that note has been asking like really negative connotation items. So like um last week I had a problem submitting my notes. There was an issue with XYZ thing and I wasn't able to submit them on time. Have you ever had issues like that? If so, what have been the issues that have prevented you from filling out your notes? And
Yeah.
like you're basically looking for them to give you like, it was raining fire from the sky and that's why I couldn't submit my notes. And so like if they're not that serious about it and that's really something that's like a deal breaker for your organization, you're looking for some serious answers, some serious stories. And that might be a great way to dig that information up.
Yeah.
After that, we got our interview process. You got your new hire in for whatever position you're hiring for. A couple things that you want to be able to do. One, give them a clear onboarding timeline. Okay, so what's going to happen? When's the start date? What should they expect from you and when? Okay, then on coming in, you should have an onboarding SOP for every one of your positions. This onboarding SOP is just what they're going to get, what they need, what responsibilities they're needing to handle on day 1, on day 30, on day 60, and when are you going to check in with the new hires. So give them like a full calendar, very clear expectations, help them understand what's required of them from training and other elements.
Yeah.
And so having a calendar and maybe even suggesting depending on what type of role it is, suggesting a schedule for them. So suggesting a schedule saying, hey, this might be how I'd set up my calendar. If I were you, I would in the mornings, maybe for like an admin position, always check new messages. And then a 30-minute block after that is for like any miscellaneous whatevers. Then in the middle, there's, your lead follow-ups or whatever. And so give them a suggested calendar and expect them to follow that calendar unless there's a reason why they shouldn't be, right? So
Yeah.
give them the information and infrastructure that's going to make them successful. And I think the final steps here is just follow up and keep people accountable, right? So give them visibility on if their job or if they're doing well for their position. Give them visibility on that and keep them accountable. Keep them accountable on the things that they tell you that they're going to do. Keep them accountable on things that you tell them to do. Keep them accountable on anything that is related to the KPIs from your job scorecard. And then, of course, if things change, make sure that they know, that it's repeated often, and that you're continuing to dive deep onto those key elements for their success. Help them understand why and everything else.
Your goal at the end of a 30 to 90-day period of having someone in your business is to draw the line. And I think this is even more true for non-clinical roles in a therapy practice. A clinical role is fairly binary. They show up, they do their sessions, and they have a list of responsibilities needed to go along with it to keep that pile running. And yes, that's be communicated, trained, and held accountable too. But if you have an admin role and they're doing multiple departments and things and processes, you need to draw a straight line between the work they do and the outcome that you guys need to get. Because here's the thing, outcomes drive the business, not work. Outcomes drive the business, not just like activities. Activities can drive outcomes if done correctly, but those both have to line up. And so it's, yes, we do it this way, but the goal isn't to call people back. That's an activity that lets us get a hold of someone to close them as a client. And as strange as there is, like, third grade level, like, we're here to close clients, like, you need to make sure that they can take ownership and understand what the point of their role is. They're supposed to drive new signups. They're supposed to drive complete, succinct, consistent, high billing and billing usage, high claim submission and acceptance on the insurance end, to drive high referrals from the marketing they do or the community partnerships they do. Like, that's the outcome. And how they accomplish that is going to change, especially if they're there for a year or 3 years or 5 years. So we can't get them used to a single thing, even if that's what drives actions right now. And then that kind of goes into past the 30 to 90 days of onboarding. What does it look like to manage this employee consistently? And that's where, you're going to need to have somewhere between a upwards of a 2 times a week one-on-one, potentially, depending on the feedback loops that are needed in the role, to maybe an every other week check-in. I don't think almost any employee should go longer than having kind of a 2 week of rhythm. I would prefer it to be weekly for every single team member. There are certain use cases where you can do it as a department, but even then, there still needs to be some level of one-on-one work. And that's where what should be covered in a one-on-one meeting that you do weekly. And I really believe that one-on-one meeting rarely should exceed 30 minutes, sometimes not 15 minutes for the initial one-on-one you have with an employee. And if there's training, if there's feedback, if there's function that comes out of those meetings on a check-in level, those should be additional scheduled time blocks or pieces to keep clarity on what the purpose of those meetings are.
I'm going to break down maybe just a quick set of like maybe standards.
Yeah.
Josh, you were talking a little bit about like being able to essentially, if you organize your team around outcomes, that is how you achieve scale in your organization. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's break down, I think, micromanagement. Micromanagement has a very specific use case in leadership and in business. And the specific use case for micromanagement is when someone's doing something new or for the first time, you can micromanage them. Okay. After that, you should not micromanage any of your team members. That's going to hurt you. That's going to hurt your team. The most important thing that you can do after the little blip of micromanagement stage is the simple act of understanding the separate cases for leadership, which is transformational leadership and transactional leadership. Transactional leadership is list items. Everything is vocalized to a staff member, and you just check off items from basically like a list or standard set of protocols that people have to do. Everything is organized on rules. And so you have to learn the rule book to do the job well. Now, from a transformational leadership standpoint, you organize roles and you organize how you interact with team members from a coaching perspective, an outcomes and coaching perspective. And so if you are able to give your team an outcome that they need to receive, and you give them rein on figuring it out, and then maybe just telling you at the end of the day what they did, that's how your organization will scale. And that's how you're not going to feel like you have to micromanage or oversee every element. So give them outcomes and values to follow. And if they follow the values and they're doing their best to hit the outcome, that's how you'll find scale. Now, there's a different story. If people can consistently not hit their outcomes or they're acting out of those values, then that's maybe where you need to change the employee. But if someone's actually doing their best and they're following it and they can give you justification on that process, they're probably making great decisions, and you probably just need to let go a little bit. Okay. So I think that's going to move into, I think that's going to help us move into like actually how to manage them and do these meetings. Ultimately, you want to figure out who is going to own whatever process. So once they understand who will own it, then you just need to understand information about the timeline. So is there any reason why you can't get that done today? They'll tell you, well, I'm doing XYZ thing. And then you, as the organizer or the leader with the most vision, should maybe help them prioritize. And I think that's maybe more important than this item. Put that there. Or I think you can try to get that done in this time frame. What do you think? You just need to help them compile, organize, and prioritize based on the vision and the pacing that you want for your team. So from there, it should be clear about what's going to happen, who's going to own it, when it's going to get done. And then all you have to do, make sure that you have that all written down. And then on the next meeting, you say, hey, did we get the thing? Did you do it?
Yep.
Did it work? And keep accountability. And that's how things are going to move lightning fast. That's how you're going to get great team meetings handled and how you're going to be able to scale in an effective way. Did I miss anything there?
When you think about this process, and I'll take it if you have an underperforming employee or they are consistently not able to get done what they need to get done, there's a couple places, a couple rocks you can look under to figure out what's going on. Number one, do they know how to do the thing or even know that that's your expectation? That's always the first question. Do they even know that this is the expectation? And a lot of times it's just bringing attention to the fact that this is the standard, or this is the expectation, or this is still the expectation, and just resetting that piece. Number two, do they know why it's important? Right? Sometimes that person lacks the motivation to actually do the work that they're supposed to because they just don't understand why it's important and the degree that their job actually depends on it. It might not feel like a big deal for them to not call the lead in the first 5 minutes of them filling out the form. So they call them in the first hour because they're like, I'm still getting back with this person, same day, actually, just like 20, 30 minutes later. Like, what's the big deal? I was over on this billing issue. And it's like, no. What you have to understand is that billing issue will always be there. And studies show that in the first 5 minutes of calling someone back, they're probably most available if they just filled out the form. So our likelihood to get a hold of them, call them, and get them booked is much higher. And then you go back to the billing issue. And so they just need to understand why in order to perform the precise version of what you're asking of them. And if they know what to do, if they know why to do it, and we're still having issues, do they understand the stakes? Do they understand that this is what they're here for? And that without this performance or without the fulfillment of this expectation, they don't have a home in this organization anymore. And there's other ways to manage and to solve problems and give good training in some of these pieces. But you always start with the first two because that allows you to take ownership of helping them resolve the problem. And often admin turnover is more often from you having to fire the person in your practice than them leaving your organization. I hear more often, oh, we just had to let this person go. They were underperforming. And we have to fix that either at the point of hire or at the point of management. Because if you consistently have admin turnover in your practice, that might be an organizational problem, a you problem, rather than something else. And that kind of goes to this piece of like long-term retention. Employees who don't feel like they can do their job well due to lack of clarity, due to lack of performance results, due to lack of growth. I have been in organizations where I have quit and found something different because I felt unsuccessful at the thing that I was doing. And that is a deep-seated desire. People want to perform well in their role. And if they feel unequipped or unable to do that, they're going to leave. And lack of training and lack of accountability leads to that every day.
Yeah. Wow, we got some good stuff right now. We got some
Three
really good
takeaways.
stuff.
You probably have an employee right now on your team that's in the red. You probably have an employee on your team right now that's in the red. And what that means is they are just underperforming, and you need to do one of two things after you watch this. You need to go have a conversation with them, reset the standards and try and get them in the green, or you need to fire them and work on replacing them. If you probably also, if you've got a large team, you probably have an employee in the yellow right now, someone that's just doing an okay-ish job. Do you have the structural rhythms in place, a precise weekly meeting, a job scorecard, KPIs? Do they have clarity on what will actually take them into green instead of yellow? Because if they're a lukewarm employee, they could be doing better, you could be doing better, and we need to address that. And that's a huge takeaway. And if you have a green employee, a bunch of green employees right now, now would be a great time to go to them, share why they're in the green. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, I think you're doing a great job in this role because you're consistently doing blank, blank, and blank. You're consistently following up with leads, managing your time well between lead work and billing work, and making sure that all of that billing information is always really up to stuff. So our claim throughput is really high. Thank you for the good work you're doing here. That's sometimes employees don't know if they're doing all this work, what's actually the thing that's doing the work, getting the result. So give affirmation there, give gratefulness there. Let your team know, all of your team know, right? If they're driving the result, the things that you feel like are doing great. And go and tackle that because it's your job as a leader and a practice owner to give that feedback.
Guys, best of luck. I think dealing with people is one of the hardest things, but it's also really fulfilling too. So if you crack the code, congrats. If you're still working on it, that's okay. Leadership is a difficult thing. And oftentimes when we start a business, I don't know if we necessarily think that part through. I don't know if we think that part through.
No one is paid. Like there are some leadership consultants in this world. There are some leadership organizations, people who make their living out of quote unquote being a leader. Being a leader is this silent hat every business owner has to figure out. And yes, in theory, there's like degrees on leadership and entrepreneurship and books on leadership, right? All of those things will help. But being a great leader is always this thing behind the scenes that's driving the rest of the conversation accidentally because it's just the people work and it's how to motivate and influence and work with people. And so you don't set out to be a leader, right? You set out to have a great business, and to have a great business that's going to require you as the owner to be a good leader as a piece of that. We'll see you next time.